So the iPad Air for 2022 was loaded up with the infamous M1 chip. It's the chip that's in their MacBooks and their iPad Pro lineup. So for Apple to put it in here, it was kind of surprising, right? It's like, why is Apple giving the customer so much power without charging more money for it? It's awesome. But it's actually made the purchase decision this year between the iPads a little more complex because now this new iPad Air is arguably just as good as an iPad Pro, which costs $200 more. So this year, the colors on these devices are more vibrant. I have the blue here, and I love this color. If you pair this with like the white Magic Keyboard, it's a whole look. But last year, the colors were more pastel. They looked good, but this year, the more saturated anodization looks really nice to me. The cellular model supports 5G, but it's not millimeter wave 5G. The USB-C port is twice as fast this year, but a lot of the device hasn't changed from the previous generation. It's the same footprint, the same 64 gig starting storage, the same camera hardware, the same speaker array, the same display, the same battery life. A lot hasn't changed, but let's start off with that performance. So, M1 chip. The performance on M1 is significantly better than what was in the previous iPad Air, at least on paper. But for me personally, I've never found the performance on iPads to be lacking, right? Any kind of recent iPad is a great performer. But that being said, I did notice a couple huge differences with this device. So any kind of heavy photo or digital illustration work that's done on the iPad is so much smoother with this M1 chip than it has been in the past. It's still a 60 Hz screen, so there's still some kind of visual latency when you're working with the file, but in terms of just performance, it is so smooth. The M1 chip handles it very well, and also with games. So Genshin obviously runs really well on this device. I think Genshin runs better on the M1 iPad, better than any other mobile device in the world. It's just like a super capable chip. But there's this game I've been playing, Pokemon Unite. If you watch my videos, you've seen, I keep bringing this thing up because I'm obsessed with this game. But on this device, it never drops any significant frames. It honestly feels like it's pegged at 59 frames per second for the entire match, even with the heaviest team fights. It's such a good performer. And this is the first time I've ever tested Pokemon Unite on M1 hardware because the game didn't exist back when the original M1 iPad Pros came out. So to see it performing at this caliber is like, it's kind of weird. Now I gotta talk about the speakers for a second. So there's two speakers on the iPad Air. There's one on the left, one on the right, but there's actually four cutouts, like four speaker cutouts. And the sound predominantly comes out of the bottom set of speakers, like the ones that are closest to your hands, if you're using in-game controls for a game that you're playing. Now, last year when I tested this device, I had controllers connected up to the iPad, right? And I was testing it and like the speakers sound good. They're actually really good. They sound very similar to the iPad Pro. But when you're playing a game and you're using on-screen controls and your hands are covering the bottom speaker grills, it really kills the volume and overall sound quality. Like you're totally killing off the higher frequencies. It's so strange how this device is built like this. Now, a lot of you guys are like, you're an idiot, Dave, just flip it upside down and you've got the good speakers up at the top, right? You'd think that, but the sleep wake button is down there. And if you hold it in that orientation, you're just turning the screen on and off the whole time. So there really is only one way to hold the device if you actually want to play a game with on-screen controls. And when you hold it in that orientation, you're just muting the speakers with your hands. I don't think it affects media consumption. Like if you're watching a show, you tend not to grip the sides like that. But when you're playing games, it's something that I think a lot of people will do. Okay, the screen. So the screen hasn't changed from the last year's model. It's a good screen. It's bright with great colors, slightly bigger bezels than the 11-inch iPad Pro, but overall a very good bezel to screen ratio. Like there's no misclicks like you get with some of the thinner bezel devices out there. It's a really good screen, but there's no ProMotion. It's a 60 Hz panel. And I've talked about this in several of my videos, but I think on phones, the existence of higher refresh screens are not super useful, I think for most people, but on a tablet, especially if you're using an Apple Pencil or any kind of stylus-based product, is just so much smoother and visually pleasing on a high refresh screen. And that's not to say that you can't do awesome work on a 60 Hz panel, right? It has nothing to do with skill. A skilled artist would be able to do amazing work on like a 12 Hz screen, but the visual experience is so much nicer when it's really smooth and the pen work that you're laying down just appears right as you touch the screen. It's just a nicer experience. So if that's what you do for a living, I'd push you towards that 120 Hz panel, but for everyone else, I don't think it's all that important, not even for gaming, because most games on iPads do not go over 60 frames per second. Okay, the cameras. So the front-facing cameras now support, well, camera, there's only one of them, now supports center stage, which is that face tracking feature. I think it's actually really cool, but this device doesn't have Face ID hardware, and I miss it. So it does have Touch ID, and it's a little bit faster this year, I think, than the previous generation, But I gotta say, I much prefer Face ID over Touch ID on a device like this. So for me, I use like two-factor authentication for passwords, and any kind of time when you're using the device to log into websites or like checking your banking info. Now you gotta touch the device multiple times to get into the banking website. It's just like, it's so much more convenient with Face ID, but I feel like this is only a thing for people that use the autofill frequently with their device. Now, I'm gonna try to distill all this information into like a purchase decision of some sort. So if you compare this product to the regular iPad, like the $329 iPad, this is a lot more money. It's got nicer aesthetics, it's got color options, it's got access to the second generation Apple Pencil, it's got access to the Magic Keyboard, which is arguably the best keyboard you can get for a tablet experience. It's got the new processor, but I think the real value of the iPad Air over like the regular iPad is the RAM. So this year, the new iPad Air has 8 gigs of RAM. And I'm not talking about like the extra RAM to do more stuff. I'm talking about software updates, because when it comes to Apple, their software updates, like how long they'll support a device, tends to be limited by how much RAM the device has. And with this thing having 8 gigs of RAM, I wouldn't be surprised if this new iPad Air gets updates like 6 or 7 years from now. For real. Now, in comparison to the iPad Pro, that 120Hz ProMotion display is really nice for artwork. You get Thunderbolt support, you get better speakers, you get a better camera system if that matters to you, but the storage is also bumped up to 128 gigs at the base. But for a lot of people, those extra features are not important. And like they're looking at this device and like, hey, for another $150 or $200 more, I could get it. But unless you're actually using that screen or the storage, and like you actually need to be aware, like I'm gonna use it, I would just go for the iPad Air. It's just such a good device this year, and you're saving a significant chunk of money. That's like 30% more money if you go with the Pro. Okay, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thumbs if you liked it, subs if you loved it. I'll see you guys next time.